With all of Boston's challenges, the tea, housing, the opioid crisis, how is it impacting surrounding communities? Well, today we find out. The president, well, he came to New Hampshire to begin his re-election campaign there. These rallies, are they just like 2016 or is something different? We sit down with two people there for both. Andrew Yang easily qualifying for the third set of Democratic debates. A little get-to-know-you session with a man who wants to give every American $1,000 a month. We give you everything we've got right now on Talk Politics. Welcome to another edition of the show. I'm Brian Shackman. Now, I don't want to make it sound like Boston is a city only with problems. It's an incredible growth story involving a city with great traditions and a largely booming economy. But as we've said quite a bit on this show, with that growth comes a lot of challenges, not the least of which is transportation, housing, crime. And the question we asked today, what's the collateral impact on surrounding communities? And we go to the surrounding communities to talk about it. We welcome in Mayor Kim Driscoll of Salem, Framingham Mayor Yvonne Spicer. First of all, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for inviting us.
Appreciate having you. I'm going to sort of throw it out there a little generally. You know, we have situations with housing, transportation, drugs. Right now, what's most important to you?
Well, for me, it's housing. Housing is a pinnacle part of Framingham. Is that one of the things is we have some transit-oriented development going on in our downtown.
You need people who are working in the city, but you want to have them get a place to live.
And we are on a T-line, and so we're building the first new housing in the downtown corridor in over 40 years. And so what we're starting to see as this new development comes in, new people are coming into the community, opportunities for economic development, new businesses are also coming in, so that is going to be a cornerstone for the city.
How hard was it to get through? Because Mayor Driscoll, you've had a really tough time trying to do something like that.
Yeah, I mean, housing is definitely a critical issue for a city that's as old as ours, almost 400 years old. We've always been a place where everyone could live, the person who poured your coffee or poured your beer or the executives. And we're finding as Boston is in this boom economy, it just grows out. And it's a real problem for people living in Salem to be able to continue to afford living there as more and more folks come into our community. So it's something we're really focused on.
So you're seeing more and more people, because I grew up in Swampscott on the North Shore, not too far, we border on Salem. And when I was little, only one of my friend's parents worked even close to Boston, and they all worked locally. Now everybody seems to commute from Swampscott. And so is that the case in your communities, and you're getting more and more people every year who want to work in the city and live in your towns?
Well, the interesting thing for Framingham is that we are starting to become a life sciences corridor, because recently an expansion of businesses such as Sanofi in Framingham has been wonderful for us, and also attracting that talent to come not only work in Framingham but live in Framingham. So seeing that kind of reverse kind of commute into Framingham, and that's exciting for us in terms of economic development.
Yeah, I want to know about the challenges. I mean, what about the transportation side of it? And we've talked about these derailments and everything else. You just have commuter rail, or
we
what?
have the busiest commuter rail stop in the MBTA system, highest ridership on our line, and we have really good access that way, and it's been a key part of our growth, people being able to get to a job. But there's a lot of jobs in our region as well, and in our community. We're home to a hospital, a college, we're the county hub, so there's courts and jurisdictional activities, and there's just as many people working, you know, next door in surrounding corridors as there are going into Boston. So we need a regional system that isn't only built for commuters who are going into Boston for a 9-to-5 job, and can also work regionally to get people to Burlington or to Beverly, or working in our own community where many people do.
You know, I talked to Michelle Wu, the Boston City Councilor, and I got a real sense of frustration that the city doesn't have more control and power over the transportation decisions. Does the mayor of Boston or the governor, have they involved you guys at all in these conversations about what needs to happen on the T and the commuter rail?
I mean, I definitely think we have a collaborative partner in Mayor Walsh, for sure. And I think the governor's housing choice bill legislation that's really focused on how we can make it easier for communities to undertake smart growth practices is
Are they
in
asking
play.
your opinions? Are you involved in any of these discussions?
Well, right now, the metropolitan opportunities that are happening in Framingham, and we're finding ourselves getting involved in more conversations around the T Coalition, on the commuter rail, since Framingham is on a commuter rail. There's a coalition of mayors that are having that dialogue right now to look at how do we improve our services.
I think there are just so many charges that the public transportation advocates have, both looking at things like commuter rail. It's existing, we have it. How do we make it better? How do we make it more frequent? How do we make it more efficient? How do we apply it to climate change? I'm a coastal community. We'd love more water transportation options. Yeah. We have our own ferry. There's opportunities there. Regional transit. folks certainly getting from Framingham to Boston, but getting from Framingham to Newton isn't that easy either. And how do we make those connections so that you don't have to be beholden to a car? You know, we're never going to be able to drive our way out of this issue. We need to come up with these options. Well, I mean, so there's a lot of frustration, for sure, and it's in those pockets of how do we do it collectively, cohesively, and with a vision.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of time, and I just say it's already a problem to drive, so these problems lately have incentivized driving, which is even the worst decision. But I want to talk lastly about the issue of drugs, because we talked off air and had a really interesting conversation. You taught me something I didn't know. I've done a lot of work with opioids. I know the statistics say that opioid-related deaths are down, but I think that has to do with just Narcan's more readily available. I don't think it means that overdoses are down. So I want to know what's going on in your communities.
Yeah. Well, for my community, I mean, we certainly have deaths that are down, but it doesn't mean overdoses are down. And you're absolutely...
Are overdoses not down?
Not as to the where we'd like to see it down. You know, it is gotten better because of the fact that there's more people trained in Narcan and how to administer it. And even my entire office has been trained. But what I'm finding is you have a handful of people overdosing consistently.
Right.
And that's where you come back in the preventative things that we need to do.
For you, it's not just heroin and fentanyl, you said. That's what shocked me.
I think there's an uptick in meth, so I think we need to be concerned about that as a community and as a Commonwealth. We haven't had the experiences that we've seen out in the Midwest. We see that if that wave comes, that's going to be problematic. For us, we're definitely seeing a downturn in fatalities, but the overdose rate's pretty consistent. We've had some knock and talk programs really trying to help people navigate getting into services when they may be at a point where they're ready. Overdose coaches at emergency rooms, investments by the medical community in more behavioral health services. But we're going to need to throw the kitchen sink at this problem if we're ever going to get ahead of it. And it's a tough one. It really is.
And consistently.
Yeah. Mayor Spicer of Framingham, Mayor Driscoll of Salem, two rising stars in their municipalities. We really appreciate the time and insight here. We really appreciate it. All right, coming up next, the Trump rally. It was a phenomenon in 2016. As we saw recently in New Hampshire, it remains packed with people both inside and out, both for and against the president. But is the Trump rally different from 2016? Up next, we try to figure that out.
You have no choice but to vote for me, because your 401ks, down the tubes, everything's going to be down the tubes.
That's the president in Manchester, New Hampshire, basically threatening a financial meltdown if he's not reelected. That's one line that certainly is different from anything he said on the stump 3 years ago, but something that's not new, polarizing views outside a Trump rally.
Yeah, I just think that there's no room for discussion. Every time you want to have a good discussion or a debate, it's either their way or the highway.
Anyone who's a Trump supporter, to me, we are ethically so different that I wouldn't have them as my friends. Period. I just can't see anything that we would have in common.
They're getting their news primarily either from Fox News or fringe websites. So a lot of these people genuinely don't know the facts going on in America, and they don't want to acknowledge facts. You know, it's pure demagoguery and idolatry. They idolize the guy, and beyond that, they don't want to know facts. It's sad.
I think they don't believe in most of what they protest about. I think they just want to fight, and they use issues as a vehicle. Because when you confront most of them on a specific issue and the details of the issue, they really can't defend their side.
That put together with our digital teams, Rob Michelson on my far left, and he's joined by James Pindle of the Boston Globe. First of all, thanks for coming in. The reason why I want to talk about this, because I think people at home see 3 or 4 sound bites. I mean, just people who've never been, I'll start with you, James. What is it like?
You know, in 2015 and even today, there is an element for a lot of people who just want to experience the show. It is less of a political rally today than it is more of a rock concert or a WWE match. I mean, there is a lot of adrenaline. Right. There's a lot of pulsating music. There is a crowd of fans. These are not voters as much as they are fans. They sell T-shirts, of course, the red hats as well.
There's a whole marketplace surrounding it. I mean, is that your sense? Because you focus on the inside, James, and you focus a lot on the outside, Rob. I mean, is it sort of like a rock concert kind of feel? I mean, are there people there just to get into arguments? I mean, what, from your perspective, is the culture of it?
Well, 100% agree. When I'm outside, the air is electric, and like you said, it's like a rock concert. They had music playing. And I think people are out there. Some people are out there for the experience. They're out there, it's like tailgating. They're out there having a good experience. But some people are looking for a fight. And that's the thing, on both sides, there's people who are like, I'm here for my team. There's other people like, I'm here to cause a little ruckus, and I want other people to kind of see me doing that and, bring out your phones and cheer. So it's kind of like a, one side versus the other fight mixed with a rock concert.
Well, let me just say this, because the reason why I want to talk about it is it the same thing, James? It was 2016, you were there in Manchester, and you did enough of this in the last cycle. Is it exactly the same?
No. When he was going to be president, when he was running to be president the first time, there was an air of chick to it. Like there was this is sort of fun. This is a great entertainer. This isn't real. Oh my gosh, I can't believe what he's going to say next. How is this going to work? This time it's darker. He is the president. He not just have one line, he's actually making policy every single time he says things. In Manchester the other day, he backed off of background checks, for example. He put it back onto mental health issues. When he wants to talk about any number of issues, is a level of seriousness that, no, this guy is the president, and you want to protest him more on the outside because he's a president versus saying that this guy's never going to win the presidency anyway.
I think the outside, lastly, I think the outside might be interesting, but I watched that entire rally. And I think there was only like 4 moments that everyone reused on cable news. The rest of it bored me to tears.
It is, yeah. It does get boring.
Particularly the second hour. I mean, he didn't have a point to this rally. The point was, I'm kicking off my re-election campaign in New Hampshire. He said that in the first 3 minutes. And after that, I'm just going to ramble and jump around and kind of forget that I already brought that part up. You're absolutely right. It was kind of boring. And people were leaving. I know he'll be upset and tweeting about this, but they were because it was getting late and bedtimes were getting in there with your kids.
Rob, thank you very much for that piece as well. And you're going to be doing more for the show. James, you're going to stick around for a little more of a presidential talk. Now, Andrew Yang, well, he's not quite drawing Trumpian crowds, but through a light dose of humor and a heavy dose of smarts, he's seeing a steady climb in the polls. This is his reaction after polling at 4% in Colorado. Must be the weed, of course, alluding to the legalization of marijuana in Colorado. And by the way, he's already qualified for the third debate, so he's no joke. But many of you don't really know much about Andrew Yang. I sat down with him for some rapid-fire questions to give us a little more color into this colorful candidate, and I started by asking him the coolest spot he's visited on the campaign trail so far.
I had a blast here in Iowa. This last trip to Iowa State Fair, I had a giant turkey leg.
Yep.
It made me feel like I was part of American history. That was fun.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you that question a little later. I'll get to it right now. I've seen them both. What's more awkward to do on the campaign trail, eat a turkey leg or line dance?
Definitely line dance.
You did a pretty good job, though.
Thank you. Because eating the turkey leg, you were satisfying your hunger, and it's going to sound crazy, but you actually, when you're eating this turkey leg, you kind of block out the fact that you're surrounded by reporters and cameras.
In terms of the questions, you get so many different questions in Iowa. The range is incredible. What's the most memorable question you've been asked so far on the campaign trail?
There was a high schooler in Iowa who asked me, first he said, I have classmates who have fentanyl patches on their shoulders, already addicted to opiates, and they're never going to seek help because it's an illegal substance. What are we going to do? And I heard this, and I said, what are you going to do about teenagers that are already addicted and have fentanyl patches, and how does this kid have to be exposed to that as a freaking high school junior or senior? And that question led me to figure out what we could do, and I concluded that we should decriminalize opiates for personal use, so that if you have an addiction, you're not afraid of getting sent to a jail cell, that we're going to send you to counseling and treatment instead.
If you were in the opportunity to debate Donald Trump one-on-one, are you going to A, go toe-to-toe, or B, stay above the fray?
You know, so many Americans have told me that they can't wait for me to debate Donald Trump because I'm sort of his opposite. Say the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math.
Right.
But he's all bluster and insults, and I'm logic and reason.
So do you ignore him? Say, what if he hovered like that he did Hillary Clinton? Do you ignore it and just stay on message, or do you engage it?
Well, one of the things that I think that's unique to me is I can actually poke fun at Donald Trump. I can make him seem ridiculous, which he is. He's a buffoon, he's a marketing charlatan. The American people can tell the difference between real solutions and this rhetoric of division and hostility that he's managed to get away with for a little while. But his time is coming to an end.
All right, finish this for me. First thing I would do as president is?
is pass a freedom dividend of $1,000 a month for every American adult. Get the resources in your hands. Build a trickle-up economy from our people, our families, and our communities up. We all know when Andrew Yang's president, it's going to be freedom dividend time.
All right, he's got that down, the freedom dividend, just one of a lot of proposals from Yang, but that's sort of the biggest one that people know about. But certainly, it's the first thing that got him in the conversation. Now, up next, we're going to expand the conversation to the whole Democratic field, beginning with that guy, Joe Biden. Has he lost a little heat on his fastball, and does it even matter? James Pindle and Sue O'Connell chime in.
So yes, your candidate might be better on, I don't know, health care than Joe is. But you've got to look at who's going to win this election.
Dr. Jill Biden raising a few eyebrows in New Hampshire earlier this week. Not exactly the compelling point you'd expect from the frontrunner's wife. And Joe Biden himself hasn't exactly lit it up on the campaign trail. Even still, though, Biden's still a clear frontrunner and even getting some ground back, as evidenced by this recent CNN poll where he's got a 14-point lead over Bernie Sanders and 15 over Senator Elizabeth Warren. So we welcome in Sue O'Connell and James Pindle of the Boston Globe to talk about this. I just want to know, where do you stand right now on Biden?
Isn't it exciting when someone in the candidate's family actually says the truth? Just goes right out and says what everybody is thinking.
Right, but it's not a truth that's going to help him.
Well, it's not going to hurt him, because that's, I think, what people are looking at that are supporting him now. I mean, what Biden has to watch out for is if Sanders or Warren get out of the race, because then if you're looking at the poll numbers, then you've got a neck and neck.
Wait, 14 plus 15 equals 29, and Biden's at 29. That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Look, I did love the internet memes after that clip you just showed, which had on a bumper sticker, Biden 2020, yeah, he stinks, but he can win. Just put that right there on the bumper sticker. He is doubling down on this. This is his number one point, is that he thinks he can be electable, despite the fact that other polls show that other candidates can still beat Donald Trump at the same time. The question happens, what happens in Iowa the moment Joe Biden doesn't win? Is it one, he's no longer electable, maybe after all, and the whole thing collapses? Or what happens the moment he comes in second place in a poll in this fall? He's no longer electable, so is it all gone? Or does it mean that people rally behind because, oh my goodness, he's giving the lead to Elizabeth Warren, we need to come back and ride behind Biden?
Do you think either of those is plausible?
Oh, absolutely.
You think he could lose Iowa, and you
Absolutely.
think he could be behind in a poll in the fall?
Absolutely. I mean, we say this every week, we're still very far out. A lot of things can happen. A lot of people, I was out today in Dudley talking to people who really hadn't made up their mind yet. They still were completely open-minded. Now, if you push them, they might say, yes, I'll pick Biden. But it's still anybody's race as long as we're talking about, the top 5 candidates.
Is Warren the only true challenger then, based on all of this? I mean, say Sanders drops out, Warren can get that. Is there anybody else besides Warren? But I want to talk about her competitiveness. Is she the only one?
Well, I think Warren's running a marathon here, and I think that, she's put the plans out. She's running the type of campaign that future candidates of any party should look at and say, this is how you run a campaign against an incumbent, with her plans and everything that she's doing, with a heavy staff. She had a lot of staff on the ground in Iowa and in New Hampshire early, so I think she's doing it. Sanders, of course, has been building off of his last run. I think he could have done a better job and would be in a better position.
I think he's done. I think Sanders can't do it, because I just think that the message hasn't changed enough. Yep. He's got another person with a very similar voice, and a lot of the stuff he did before has already been enacted. We got a $15 basically minimum wage. I mean, what about Warren?
Here's the deal. The campaign is the haves and the have-nots. And so there are 22 people running, another person drop out this week. It's about 3 people right now. It's about Warren, it's about Biden, and it's about Sanders. And Sanders, to your point, has the highest floor. He has a level of support that he began with. Right. If you were to just look at the New Hampshire primary for a second, remember, he won with 60% of the vote in 2016. All he has to do is retain half of those people at 30%, and he wins. And everyone's trying to build support. He's just trying to retain support.
So it's math. I mean, it really is coming down to a basic mathematical, based on probability, based on what they did the last time, and who, when they go into the poll in Iowa and in New Hampshire, who are they individually going to vote for? I know that sounds very obvious, but I think each of us have had a time in our life where we thought we were voting for someone, and then we went in and voted for someone.
All right, listen, I wanted to get to more of the candidates, but I have to get to this while I have you in here, and I know both of you have an opinion on this, and this doesn't have to do with the presidential race. This draft Kennedy thing against Ed Markey, it fascinates me. The first, I'm going to throw the questions out and let you have it as some raw meat. Where is it coming from? I mean, is this really a grassroots movement, or is this Kennedy trying to subtly go in that direction? I have no idea what the state of the situation is.
Nobody at Joe Kennedy's level of holding office, allow something like that to happen unless they have totally endorsed it, right? So that's something that has to be vetted, or else it would have been crushed immediately. Because how do you say no if you are, if it is an actual grassroots campaign and you don't want to run? What do you do? Say no? So I think that horse is out of the barn. I think it's definitely a Kennedy-driven, a Kennedy staff-driven, Kennedy volunteer-driven effort, and I think that it's just a matter of moments before he announces he's actually running.
I've done the reporting on it. It's from Kennedy.
Okay, so here's my question. Senator Warren comes out endorsing Markey.
When? When was the videotape?
Okay, but
she allowed the video to be released?
Yes, and Kennedy has been Kennedy's been a supporter of Warren. So connect the dots with me. I mean, I would assume that deep down Warren would be a Kennedy supporter.
It's complicated. When she was asked over the weekend about this hottest story, that the bombshell in basic politics, she continued to say Ed Markey is great, and then she said, but, and then she gave a lot of compliments onto Joe Kennedy. They've known each other since for politics. Obviously, he had her at Harvard Law School. At the end of the day, we will not have a primary.
Markey will retire.
Or Kennedy will decide not to do it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Boom. You're done. That's it. You earned your keep here. Anything.
So Elizabeth Warren's off the hook at the end of the day.
Right.
That was
right.
She's off the hook.
Yep. So she gets to still support
Now, I
Markey.
won a primary. It'd be amazing.
Right. But you won't see one. Sue, James, we really appreciate it. James Spindle of the Boston Globe, and Sue O'Connell, of course, homegrown. All right, coming up next on Talk Politics, my final thoughts, including what I learned about the presence of these people who want to be president. One final thought here. When I sat down with Andrew Yang, I have to admit I was impressed. And then I got to thinking, on the stage, he doesn't seem like that impressive a presence. And it makes you realize that to command attention on a national stage, even a global stage, you really need to fill the room. And it's not about size or the bass in your voice. It's about presence. And it's still TBD if any of these Democratic candidates have the presence to stake out sufficient real estate on the stage with President Trump. But of course, we're going to find out. Until next time, I'm Brian Shackman, and this is Talk Politics.